Have you ever stood on the edge of a crowded room, watching the easy laughter and seamless bonds forming between other women, and felt an invisible glass wall separating you from them? It is a silence that feels personal, a distance that feels like a verdict. If you are a woman who has navigated life, feeling like a perpetual outsider among your own gender, if you have been the one quietly excluded, the one ghosted without explanation, or the one who simply never receives the invitation, there is a vital shift in perspective you need to make right now. This is not a deficiency in your character. This is not evidence that you are socially broken. What if this isolation is actually a sacred mark? What if it is an energetic signature, revealing a profound truth about your psyche, your ancestral lineage, and your spiritual destiny? Carl Jung discovered that certain women carry a specific archetypal pattern that renders them fundamentally incompatible with conventional female bonding. These women unwittingly trigger deep-seated reactions in other females, leading to inexplicable rejection, subtle forms of sabotage, and a life spent largely in solitude. However, there is a hidden dimension to this pattern that is rarely discussed. The very quality that exiles you from superficial female circles is the exact trait that marks you for a deeper initiation, a psychological and spiritual journey that most women will never undertake simply because they remain too comfortable within the safety of the collective. Here on Quiet Psychology, we are going to explore why you have never truly belonged among women. Uncover the ancient wound you are carrying that repeats across your relationships, and discover how this forced solitude might actually be the doorway to a formidable form of feminine power that exists completely outside the need for external validation. The pattern typically reveals itself early, often in the fragile years of childhood, when a girl first intuitively senses that she does not mirror back what other females expect to see. Jung understood that our first and most critical encounter with the feminine archetype occurs through the mother. When that primary relationship is marked by coldness, competition, or emotional abandonment, something fractures in the daughter's capacity to trust female connection. The maternal complex doesn't simply create a singular wound. It establishes a template. It creates a psychic blueprint that repeats throughout life in every attempted friendship and every circle of women she tries to enter. You likely learned young that your authenticity was too much, too bright, too raw, or too intense for the comfort of those around you. Perhaps your mother could not contain your emotional intensity, or your sisters viewed you with competition rather than celebration, or aunts whispered about you in tones that signaled something was inherently wrong with your nature. This was not paranoia. Children possess an uncanny sensitivity to energetic rejection, and you felt it in your bones long before you had the language to describe it. The psyche records everything. What begins as maternal wounding eventually calcifies into an invisible force field that keeps you separated from the female community throughout your adult life. The mechanism operates beneath conscious awareness. You may approach a group of women with genuine openness, yet within minutes, sometimes seconds, a familiar chill descends. The conversation flows around you, but rarely includes you. Invitations that seem promised never materialize. Connections that feel promising dissolve without explanation. Jung called this the repetition compulsion, the psyche's unconscious drive to recreate the original wound in hopes of finally healing it. But with each iteration, the repetition only deepens the groove, confirming the false belief that you are somehow fundamentally unfit for female friendship. What makes this specifically painful is the ancestral dimension. If you look back through your maternal lineage, you will likely find other women who walked alone. Grandmothers who were the subject of gossip, great aunts who never quite fit into their communities, or mothers who had acquaintances but no true intimacy. This pattern of feminine isolation travels through bloodlines like a silent inheritance, a karmic wound passed from mother to daughter across generations. You are not just carrying your own loneliness, you are bearing the accumulated solitude of the women who came before you, women who also could not or would not conform to the collective feminine mask. But here is where the narrative shifts. We must view your solitude through a different lens entirely. Jung spoke of the archetype of the wild woman, though it was Clarissa Pinkola Estes who gave it full voice in her exploration of women's instinctual nature. The wild woman cannot be domesticated by social conventions or collective expectations of how femininity should perform itself. She moves by different rhythms, speaks different languages, and honors different gods than the socialized feminine collective. You do not participate in the ritualized gossip that bonds many female groups, because something in you recognizes it as a form of psychic cannibalism. Women feeding on the lives of others to avoid examining their own. The coded conversations about makeup, diets, men, or motherhood, engaged in ways that reinforce collective norms rather than question them, feel hollow to you. This is not because you judge other women for engaging in them, but because your psyche simply cannot sustain interest in what feels like a performance rather than an authentic encounter. Your emotional and spiritual depth registers to others as intensity, and intensity makes people uncomfortable. Most social bonds among women operate on an unspoken agreement to keep things light, manageable, and entertaining. You, however, bring questions to the table that have no easy answers. You speak truths that others prefer to avoid. You feel things too deeply and express them too honestly. In groups that function on emotional equilibrium, you become the destabilizing element, the one whose very presence threatens the carefully maintained balance. What you represent to other women is a mirror they do not want to look into. They see in you the parts of themselves they have had to suppress in order to belong, the wildness they have had to tame, the depth they have had to flatten, and the authenticity they have had to compromise. Jung called this shadow projection, the unconscious mechanism by which we reject in others what we cannot accept in ourselves. You become the carrier of the collective feminine shadow, the repository for everything women have learned to deny in order to be acceptable, likable, and safe. This is why you are often excluded in ways that cannot quite be proven. The invitation that somehow got lost, the group text you weren't added to, the gathering you only learned about after it happened. When confronted, there are always plausible explanations, innocent mistakes, forgetfulness. But your nervous system knows the truth. You are not paranoid. You are reading accurately the energetic rejection that operates beneath the surface of social nicety. Women who shine without needing the group's permission, who exist fully without seeking validation from the collective, trigger a narcissistic wound in those who are still dependent on external approval for their sense of self. Throughout history, women like you have been called witches, not because you practiced magic, but because you could not be controlled by the collective feminine norms. The witch is simply the woman who lives at the edge of the village, who possesses knowledge that threatens the established order, and who does not need the community's blessing to know her own power. Modern society no longer burns such women at the stake, but it still finds effective ways to isolate them, to mark them as other, and to ensure they remain outside the circle of accepted femininity. The price you pay for refusing to lower your frequency, for declining to dim your light, and for insisting on authenticity over acceptance is loneliness. Real, bone-deep, and sometimes unbearable loneliness. But is it truly loneliness, or is it something else entirely? This question opens a door to understanding what Jung considered one of the most important psychological and spiritual processes available to human consciousness. Individuation, in Jung's framework, is the journey of becoming who you actually are, rather than who the collective expects you to be. It is the process by which the psyche differentiates itself from mass consciousness and discovers its unique configuration, its singular purpose, and its authentic voice. This process, more often than not, requires periods of profound solitude. Not the solitude of exile or punishment, but the solitude of incubation, gestation, and metamorphosis that can only occur in silence and stillness. Women undergoing individuation rarely find compatible female companionship because they are operating at a different frequency than those still living primarily through the persona. The social mask Jung described as the compromise between the individual and society. You are not better than other women. You are simply at a different stage of psychological and spiritual development. You have heard a call that most people spend their entire lives ignoring, the call of the self, that deep center of the psyche that demands you become whole rather than merely acceptable. Can you feel the distinction between empty loneliness and sacred solitude? Empty loneliness is the wound crying out for healing. It is the abandoned child within you, still seeking the mother's embrace that never came. Sacred solitude, however, is the soul's intentional retreat from the noise of collective consciousness in order to hear its own voice. Both can exist in you simultaneously, and discerning which is which in any given moment requires deep honesty with yourself. The self, that organizing principle at the core of your being, sometimes orchestrates isolation not as punishment, but as protection and preparation. It knows you need distance from the collective's constant conditioning to discover what you actually think, feel, believe, and desire. It knows you need the silence to hear the whispers of your own soul beneath the cacophony of social expectations. It knows you need the solitude to alchemize your wounds into wisdom, your pain into presence, and your loneliness into sovereignty. This is where many women find themselves at midlife, isn't it? You have tried so hard for so long to find your place among other women, to create the friendships you see other people effortlessly maintaining, and to build the community you are told women naturally create with each other. And despite your efforts, despite your genuine desire for connection, the pattern persists. You remain outside, alone, watching others bond in ways that seem forever unavailable to you. Jung would say, you are being called to a different task entirely. Not the task of fitting in, but the task of becoming whole. Not the task of being validated by others, but the task of learning to validate yourself from the deep feminine source within your own psyche. This is what he meant by integrating the inner feminine, what he called in men the anima, and in women the connection to the great mother archetype that exists not outside, but inside the psyche itself. You must become your own mother, your own best friend, and your own witness. This is not consolation for failing to find external friendship. This is the actual spiritual work you incarnated to do. The external isolation is forcing you into internal reconciliation with the wounded feminine within you. Every time another woman rejects you, excludes you, betrays you, or simply drifts away without explanation, you have a choice. You can let it confirm your unworthiness, or you can use it as an invitation to go deeper into your own psychic territory, to discover the internal feminine source that never abandons, never judges, and never requires you to be anything other than exactly what you are. The Great Mother archetype exists not just in external women or in the collective unconscious, but as a living presence within your own psyche. This internal mother can offer what the external mother, the human mother bound by her own wounds and limitations, could never give. She sees you completely, loves you unconditionally, and witnesses your truth without flinching. But accessing her requires you to move through layers of grief and rage. You must mourn the mothering you never received and release the fantasy that someday someone out there will finally give you what you needed all along. This descent into the inner feminine territory is what the mystics called the dark night of the soul, and what Jung recognized as the necessary dissolution before reorganization at a higher level. You are being asked to mother yourself through this process, to hold your own hand in the darkness, to speak to your frightened parts with compassion rather than contempt. When the crying child within you reaches for comfort, you learn to be the one who provides it. When the rejected adolescent in you rages at the unfairness of isolation, you learn to be the one who validates her pain without being consumed by it. When the exhausted woman you are now wants to give up, you learn to be the one who whispers, "Keep going, you're almost through." This internal work is alchemical in the truest sense. You are taking the base metal of rejection and transforming it into the gold of self-possession. You are transmuting the wound of not being chosen by others into the wisdom of choosing yourself. You are converting the pain of isolation into the power of sovereignty. This does not happen overnight. It is not a simple decision or a single realization. It is a process that unfolds over years, requiring you to repeatedly return to your own center, to repeatedly choose self-loyalty over social approval, and to repeatedly honor your truth, even when it costs you connection. Jung understood that true psychological maturity involves what he called the integration of opposites, the capacity to hold paradox without collapsing into one pole or the other. You must learn to hold both your desire for connection and your acceptance of solitude, both your wound of rejection and your gift of independence, both your human need for mirroring and your spiritual capacity for self-sufficiency. This is not about transcending human needs. It is about not being destroyed by their non-fulfillment. It is about finding a way to be fully human and fully whole, even when life doesn't give you what every child deserves, what every woman longs for. The simple grace of being seen and loved by her own kind. The paradox Jung understood so well reveals itself here. The more you reconcile with your own internal feminine, the less desperately you need validation from external women. The more you learn to mother yourself with compassion and witness yourself with understanding, the less the absence of female friendship feels like a fatal flaw in your being. You stop asking what is wrong with you and start asking what is right about you that the collective could not contain. You stop trying to fix yourself to fit in and start celebrating the aspects of yourself that were always too wild, too deep, and too real for comfortable company. The energy field you carry has changed through this process of forced individuation. Where once you might have emanated a desperate hunger for acceptance, now you emit something entirely different. It is the frequency of a woman who has stopped abandoning herself for others, who has learned that betraying your own knowing to gain social acceptance is the cruelest form of self-violence. Other women sense this shift, though they might not be able to name it. Some are drawn to it, recognizing in you a permission they have been seeking their own lives. Others are repelled by it, threatened by the mirror you hold up to their own compromises. Jung wrote extensively about the phenomenon of synchronicity, meaningful coincidences that reveal the hidden connections between inner psychological states and outer events. Apply this lens to your experience of friendlessness, and a pattern emerges. The external isolation mirrors an internal process of differentiation, of separating your authentic self from the false selves you have worn to survive. Every friendship that dissolves, every group that excludes you, every connection that fails to materialize, these are not random rejections. They are the universe clearing space for you to meet yourself without the distraction of relationships that would keep you comfortable in your persona rather than pushing you toward your truth. Consider the alchemical symbolism Jung loved to explore. The first stage of alchemical transformation is called nigredo, the blackening. It is a period of decomposition and despair, where everything false must die before something true can be born. Your years of social isolation, particularly if they have been marked by confusion, grief, and soul-searching, represent this nigredo phase. You are in the crucible, being heated and broken down, so that the gold of your authentic self can separate from the dross of your conditioned self. This is not comfortable. It was never meant to be. But it is necessary. The woman who emerges from this process, if she does not become bitter or hardened by it, possesses a quality associated with the individuated self. She has integrated her shadow, owned her darkness as well as her light, and accepted her completeness as a human being. Rather than trying to present only acceptable portions of herself to the world, she has faced her unloved parts, her rejected aspects, and her hidden shames. And instead of denying them, she has incorporated them into a larger wholeness. This is what makes her both attractive and threatening, both magnetic and isolating. She is no longer playing the game of partial presentation that most social bonding requires. Think about the fairy tales Jung analyzed, particularly those featuring women who undergo transformation through isolation. Sleeping Beauty does not wake up in a crowd. She awakens in solitude, in the private chamber where she has been sleeping for 100 years. Snow White's deepest transformation occurs in the forest, alone with the animals and the dwarfs who exist outside normal human society. Rapunzel grows her power in a tower, separated from the world. These are not just children's stories. They are archetypal templates for a particular kind of feminine development that requires withdrawal from the collective to discover personal power. Your tower, your forest, your sleeping chamber is the very isolation you have been enduring. You haven't been separate from life. You have been incubating a different kind of life, one that does not depend on external validation for its existence. The years you have spent developing an internal reference point, learning to trust your own perceptions, and building a relationship with the deeper layers of your psyche. These years have been essential preparation for a mode of being in the world that draws from source rather than from social approval. Does this mean you will never have female friends? Not necessarily, but it means the friends you do attract, if any come, will be of a different quality entirely. They won't be surface friendships based on shared hobbies or geographical proximity. They will be soul recognitions, rare meetings between women who have also walked through the fire of individuation and emerged on the other side. These friendships, when they occur, do not require constant contact or validation. They exist in a different dimension, sustained by mutual respect for each other's sovereignty, rather than a need for each other's approval. In Jungian thought, the transcendent function describes the psyche's capacity to hold opposing energies in tension until a third thing emerges, something new that transforms both poles. Your experience of loneliness contains this potential. The tension between your desire for connection and your inability to find it in conventional ways, if held consciously rather than denied or bitterly rejected, can give birth to a new understanding of what connection actually means. Perhaps true connection isn't about the number of friends you have or the frequency of social engagements. Perhaps it is about the depth of presence you bring to your encounters, however rare, and the quality of relationship you maintain with your own soul in the between times. Some women, however, are genuinely meant to walk much of their path alone. This is not failure, it is a calling. The archetype of the hermit, the mystic, the wise woman who dwells at the forest's edge. This is a valid and valuable feminine expression. You might be carrying this archetypal pattern, living it out not by choice, but by soul design. The world needs women who do not require the group's permission to exist, who model the possibility of wholeness in solitude, and who demonstrate that a woman's worth is not determined by how many friends she can gather around her. Your journey has taught you things that women surrounded by easy friendships never learn. You know how to sit with yourself in the dark hours without distraction. You know how to process your emotions without immediately offloading them onto others. You know how to make decisions based on your own internal compass rather than group consensus. You know how to find meaning and purpose that does not depend on social validation. These are not small achievements. These are the fruits of forced individuation. They are the gifts born from the painful necessity of learning to be your own companion. The vibration you carry now, if you have done this work with consciousness rather than bitterness, is distinctive. You have stopped explaining yourself to people who do not want to understand. You have stopped diminishing your light to make others comfortable. You have stopped contorting yourself into shapes that might finally earn you a place at the table. Instead, you have built your own table, set your own standards, and created your own definition of what a rich feminine life can be. This is sovereignty, the inner queendom that no external circumstance can touch. Jung believed the individuation process, while painful and isolating, ultimately served not just the individual, but the collective. Every person who completes their own becoming, who integrates their shadow and honors their authentic self, raises the consciousness of the entire human family. Your willingness to endure the loneliness of becoming real, rather than settling for the company that would require you to remain false, serves something larger than your personal happiness. You are modeling possibility for other women, showing them that survival, even thriving, is possible outside the collective feminine agreement. The younger women watching you, perhaps from a distance, see something in you they cannot yet name. They see a woman who does not ask permission, who does not need approval, and who carries herself with the quiet dignity of someone who knows her own worth. You might not know you are being observed, and you might not realize you are teaching simply by existing authentically. But this is often how wisdom transmits itself, not through words or explicit teaching, but through the witnessed example of a woman who chose truth over belonging and found that she could not only survive the loneliness, but transform it into something luminous. This does not mean the wound has completely healed. You might still feel the ache when you see groups of women laughing together, still wonder what it would be like to have that easy camaraderie, and still grieve the friendships you never got to have. These feelings are human and valid, but they no longer define you. They no longer convince you that something is fundamentally wrong with your being. You have learned to hold both truths simultaneously: the sadness of missing something you have never had, and the peace of knowing you are exactly where your soul needs you to be. The inheritance you leave, whether you have daughters or not, whether anyone consciously acknowledges it or not, is profound. You prove that a woman's value is not measured by her social circle. You demonstrate that authenticity matters more than acceptance. You show that solitude, when embraced with consciousness, can be a powerful teacher rather than a prison. You embody the possibility that wholeness is achievable, even, perhaps especially, in the absence of the validation society tells us we must have. There is a particular kind of woman who will understand every word of this, who will feel seen in ways she has never felt seen before, and who will recognize herself in this description not as a diagnosis, but as an acknowledgement. If that is you, know this: your aloneness is not evidence of your inadequacy. It might be evidence of your courage, your depth, and your refusal to betray yourself for the comfort of belonging to something that was never truly home. The path you are walking is ancient, worn smooth by the feet of countless women before you, who also chose the difficult grace of their own company over the easy lie of false connection. If this exploration has touched something true in you, if you have recognized your own story in these words, consider subscribing to Quiet Psychology, where we continue to explore the hidden dimensions of feminine psychology and the journey toward authentic selfhood. Leave a comment sharing your own experience of walking alone among women. Your story matters, your solitude speaks, and perhaps in sharing it here, you will discover you are less alone than you imagined, that across distance and time, there are other women who understand the sacred loneliness of becoming real in a world that often prefers we remain comfortable fictions instead.